And then I saw the action there was some action going in there, if you know what I mean. And I had never seen that, man. And I just said, oh my God, where am I at? And then she walked in and said, this is San Francisco. I said, oh, okay, I get it. This is San Francisco.
That was Del Seymour, founder of Tenderloin Walking Tours and co-Tenderloin. Welcome to Storied San Francisco. I'm your host, Jeff Hunt. In this podcast, Del traces his life journey from Chicago, where he was born and went to school, through the military, where he served as a medic, to Los Angeles, where he moved to get away from the snow and cold weather of his hometown. Del became one of the first firefighter medics for the LAFD, and worked there until he moved to the Bay Area to be with his family. This podcast was produced in partnership with an exciting new project that launches today. It's called Represent Collaborative, and it's a storytelling platform that covers issues of racial and social justice. It's also part of our Small Business September series. Here's Del.
I was born in Chicago. Chicago's a kind of very unique city. There's no city in the world exactly like Chicago. It's a melting pot of sort, but it melts into different areas. So like you got a lot of diversity here, and then you melt it, but then it goes back diverse after it melts. So we actually have something that I think is so PC and correct to call a part of a town Chinatown, or Japantown, or Polish town, and they still we do it here, and they still do it in Chicago. And I think that I never use those terms because I don't think that restricts anyone else from feeling comfortable. If you go to Chinatown, you immediately feel like an outsider because you're not Chinese, unless you're Chinese. If you go to, there's a part of Chicago called Poland Town. They actually call it K-Town because most of the streets in that part of town begin with the K, which is like Warsaw. All the streets begin with the K. Kowalski and Komak and Kaminsky and all of that. So you don't feel comfortable in that neighborhood. I never have because it's just like they're saying this is Chinatown and this is Poland Town. And just right now, even in San Francisco, I never use that word for that Stockton area. That shouldn't be restricted or make anyone else feel uncomfortable. And you said, well, it's cute. No, it's not cute. It's restricted to me. So anyway, I grew up in Chicago. I started getting interested in politics in Chicago because we lived in such a terrible neighborhood. I was looking for change back then. I started working for Jesse Jackson in Operation Breadbasket in the early 60s. I went to several expeditions to the South, to Alabama. I was with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Action Committee. Back then, we went to Selma, we went to Montgomery, we went to Birmingham when I was a young teenager. So I became an activist then. I walked the streets of Chicago with Martin Luther King, held his hand two complete separate times when we were trying to integrate the Chicago school system. Because in Illinois, in the early 60s, the school system in Chicago was legally segregated. Right. Even if you wanted to, you could not go to a white school or a white could not go to a black school. Right. And there was a lot of violence on the buses were being turned over and all of that. So I was heavily into that. That was my thing. So, which I kind of brought that activism out here.
What kind of work were you doing when you went to the South? What kind of stuff would you guys do down there?
We were integrating the Woolworths and Kresge, which is a drugstore chain, their lunch counters.
Got it.
We're integrating the, I think the chain was a Red Roof Inns. And we were integrating the bus stations. Because at that time blacks had to use the Trailways bus station. That was the black bus company. And we couldn't use the Greyhound bus stations. As the Greyhound buses started to allow blacks in, you couldn't use the bathroom or you couldn't use the water fountain. And all the restaurants were segregated. They had a black dining room and a white dining room. All the movie theaters were either black movie theater or the white movie theaters. So with the success of changing those laws, it became Jim Crowish. So I went through that Jim Crow issue, where the reason they put balconies in movie theaters back then, when they still exist, was not for doubling the occupancy or anything like that. It was segregating the movie theaters. We were all in the balconies.
Yeah. And so you were seeing a lot of that in Chicago as well, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah, it just wasn't legally allowed, but it definitely was. You could not go into a white neighborhood. You would get your ass whooped. There's a street in Chicago called Wentworth Avenue. I lived on Wentworth for years. It was row houses on both sides of Wentworth. And Chicago is so hot in the summertime and muggy, humid, you couldn't go in the house till like 2:00 in the morning because it was too hot in that house. There was no such thing as air conditioning. So everybody sat on their stoops or their porch. Everybody in Chicago sat on their porch till 2:00 in the morning. So we would sit there at night looking across the street into the Italian neighborhood. And they sat there looking at us. You could not go across that street. If you hit a ball and the ball bounced on the other side of the street, that ball was gone.
Right.
You could look at that ball, but you could not go over there and get it, and vice versa.
So that's interesting. You lived or grew up on that line, literally.
On Wentworth Avenue. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had a firsthand view of some of those divisions that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it was rough. Every once in a while, we would get into a physical thing. Somebody would walk across the street or something, and the N word was used very regularly by the other folks on the other side, and we used our derogatory words against them. So it was mutual. And that was probably the biggest memory I have of Chicago.
Did you go through the Chicago public school system, or?
Well, I went through the Catholic system. Chicago
Catholic school. Okay. How was that for you?
Well, looking back on it, it was as archaic and brutal and wrong as it could be. You know, the beatings by the nuns and the priests were just, when you look back on it, and looking back on it, they were sexual beatings. Because the priest would pull your pants down and whoop you bare ass with a paddle.
Yeah.
And if you look in S&M, that's on page 2 of the S&M manual.
Yep.
So we got a lot of discipline out of it.
Did you go all the way through, I guess, high school?
A to Z. And I actually went to the preparatory seminary to be a priest.
Oh, wow.
I did like 4 months.
I was going to say, what happened there?
Called me with a girl in the dorm. Yeah.
That'll do it. Did you leave, or did they kick you out?
I got put out that night.
Okay.
Oh no. They woke the whole staff up. They woke the whole. This is a woman in. I said, what's wrong with that? I couldn't.
Exactly.
I wasn't clear on the concept of no women in your life. I just wasn't clear on that.
Yeah.
So I mean,
okay.
I volunteered. I mean, it was a mutual leaving. I said, oh, hell no. If you are on that mode, no, I can't do this.
Okay, so what happened then after you let's say you left the seminary?
Yeah, so I got immediately after I got drafted. We were at the peak of the Vietnam War, and I became an airborne medic, helicopter medic, for evacuating soldiers from one part of the world to other parts of the world. And I was probably in parts of the world that I still can't say where I was. So I did that for 2 years. I found out when I was in the service that it doesn't snow in California. So the moment I got back home to Chicago, I started packing that day because that snow, I've never been good with snow. And so I came to LA, and I within a year, I became a firefighter paramedic with the Los Angeles Fire Department.
Okay, and what year would that have been?
That would have been 1969.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, 1969. And I was actually there's probably 30 to 40,000 historical paramedics in the state of California, licensed by the state of California. My batch number is 35. So I was one of the first people to graduate a paramedic program in the state of California because it was a brand new industry.
Right. You must have seen some incredible stuff.
I probably saw more incredible stuff on the streets of LA than I've seen in the service.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, much
Out of
much.
one into another.
Well, see, the thing is, when we responded as a rescue unit with the helicopter, the unit had already stabilized the patient, more or less, and they may have been with him for hours before we got there. And we only took stabilized chest and head shots, because that was triage. But in LA, we got there within 2 to 3 minutes of the incident. You know, I remember one call we got there, the gun, literally, like they say on TV, the guy was standing there, smoke was still coming out the barrel of the gun, literally. I mean, really. So we were there way, way before the police or anything. So, and I was stationed right in the hood, South Central LA. So our gamut went from overdoses to murders to suicides. We had 4 major freeways in my district. So we had some, the LA freeways are like racetracks. So we had all the horrendous traffic accidents. We had a lot of swimming pools in our apartment complexes. Then they fill most of them up now because of the liability. But when I was there, every apartment complex had a swimming pool. And drinking and swimming pools don't go together. So we had so many drownings in our district. And of course, we had fires. We had car fires and house fires. So yeah, it was full. A normal station rescue unit handles maybe 10 to 12 calls a day. We had 36. We did 36 a day. So we were rocking and rolling.
Yeah, never a dull moment.
No, it was never a dull moment there. No.
Yeah. So how long did you stick with that?
I did that for 7 years.
Oh, wow. That's a while. Okay.
And then I became a single dad, so I couldn't do the 24-hour shifts anymore.
Right.
And looking back, I should have made accommodation because that was the best job I would have ever had to stay with. But, I had a side job as I owned a construction company. So it wasn't a matter of finances, but I should have looked at it as a matter of stability, because you can't get a job like that, That's 1 in a million to be a firefighter paramedic, especially in the city of LA, the best fire department in the United States. It's even rated by the insurance industry as the best fire department in the United States. Because we get there, we get there. San Francisco's probably number 2 or 3, but LA, we get there quick. And we got the ladders to handle any building. Just amazing, amazing department. Racist as hell, but amazing department. But what isn't racist,
Right.
So then my sister was able to help me out and keep our kids here in the Bay Area. And I was coming up every weekend. And then she said, why don't you just move up here? Because I didn't have a lot going on in LA at that time. And I moved up to the Bay Area.
Can we just go back really quickly? Do you remember your first time in San Francisco? Can you tell us about that?
I remember the first time in San Francisco. I think the first night and me being from LA, conservative, soldier, firefighter, never used drugs in my life, never touched a drug in my life and all of that, and not really attuned to this California lifestyle. I met this girl, I forget where, but she says, let's meet on 6th Street in San Francisco. And I said, okay, not knowing never really been in San Francisco, had no idea what 6th Street is. And so I go to meet her at this bar at 6th Street, and I get there ahead of time. And I remember specifically, I used to drink Coors Light. And I sat down at the bar waiting on her, and I asked for a Coors Light. And the bartender says, we don't sell Coors Light. And Coors Light at that time was a very popular beer. I said, well, that's weird. I said, well, give me a Budweiser. He said, okay. So he brings me a Budweiser. Later he comes and he's washing dishes right in front of me. And I says, why wouldn't you sell Coors Light? And he says, no respectable gay bar would sell Coors Light because, it was a boycott. And I said, gay bar? And then I turned around and I had never been to the gay bar in my life, right? And this is back in the late 60s or so. And then I saw the action it was some action going in there, if you know what I mean. And I had never seen that, man. And I just said, oh my God, where am I at? And then she walked in and she said, this is San Francisco. I said, oh, okay, I get it. This is San Francisco. This is what we do up here. I said, okay, this new to me. So that was
Did you already have, or were you already aware of, because that's right around kind of the time of when gay activism really started in the mid and late 60s, right? Did San Francisco already have a reputation? Like, was that on your mind at all?
No, it did not. There was no Castro then. I mean, well, there's always was a Castro. Castro was not a gay neighborhood. The gayness in San Francisco those years historically was 6th Street, Turk and Taylor, the south part of the Tenderloin. It was very restricted because it was illegal.
Street.
So they very illegal. They had some clubs. They had the gay club underneath the straight club, but no, it wasn't. There was no outing at that time.
Right. Okay, so let's go back, or I guess let's go forward now to what you're talking about. Your was it your sister you said, or you had such family up here? Okay.
And she lived in Oakland.
Okay,
So,
I was just gonna ask where in the Bay Area. So
yeah, she lived in Oakland. So I spent maybe my first 2 years in the Bay Area. Well, yeah, I don't know how many years, 2 to 3 years in Oakland. I got a job working for Bay Alarm Company. When they first started, now they probably got 300 or 400 service trucks. Then we had 3 trucks. So a very small company. And I just kind of stayed in Oakland, maybe hung out in Oakland. I loved Oakland. I still like Oakland. Don't love it necessarily, but I still like Oakland. I never came to San Francisco. Never came to San Francisco anymore, no.
Okay.
That bridge was a long way away. And I knew nothing about San Francisco, so
but you knew that bar on 6th Street. That's it.
That bar on 6th, and that bar is still there. It's I forget the name of that club. It's painted all black. It's on not Mena, Steven. No, not Jesse. It's on Jesse and 6th Street, and it's okay. A rock. Well, I don't know what they call it now. Rock and roll bar, whatever they call it. But it's still
but it's still a bar.
Still a bar. It's still a bar.
So in addition to working at Bay Alarm, those few years that you lived in Oakland, what other kinds of things were you doing? Were you still, did you still consider yourself an activist, or when did that come back into your life? Or?
Well, I got so busy working, there was not much activism going on then, except the Black Panthers, and it was just a little too strong for me. Their message was a little too strong for me. And plus I was so anti-guns, anti-violence. I just couldn't get with a group that openly carry guns. That was not my mission. Luckily, in the service, I did not have to carry an offensive weapon. I carried a defensive weapon, a shotgun, that we never even used, because medics cannot carry offensive weapons.
Right.
So I didn't want to get with I didn't want to get with that.
Well, what other kinds of things in Oakland were you doing?
Just working, going out to the clubs, meeting folks. Just trying to get into this California thing.
Did you think yet, that you were kind of laying roots or anything like that? Did you think you were going to stick around this area for a while at that point?
At any moment, I could have gone back to Chicago.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, even now that is not off the table.
Right. Can you speak to what it was that kept you here?
My kids.
Okay.
That's really the only thing that's keeping me here now.
Okay.
I would much rather be in, it's so much silliness, ridiculous out here, the political wise. I would much rather be in Baltimore or Chicago, where I think I could actually make a change. And I think I can actually get some things done that is impossible to get down here.
I guess you're in Oakland, and then what happened? Where did you go next?
Then I came to San Francisco.
Okay, and what brought that change on?
I don't remember my reason for coming over to San Francisco.
Okay.
That day, that night, and I'll tell you why later. But so that was one of the 2 bad decisions in life. One is leaving the fire department. 2 was coming to San Francisco.
That was Del Seymour. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, Del will talk about his move to the city and cover most of his time here, mostly in and around the Tenderloin. Please join us for part 2 this Thursday. Music for Storied San Francisco is by Otis McDonald. Photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. The show is hosted and produced by me. Michelle and I have produced more than 120 episodes over the last 3 years, and you can find them all over at our website, storiedsf.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, as well as just about everywhere you can listen to podcasts. Please subscribe to stay up to date on all the content we publish. And if you have any feedback for us, or you just want to say hi, our email is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, stay safe, and stay healthy.